is Pez dispenser pose. You'll need your yoga block, and you take the block and put it up high in the middle of your thighs. Feels a little bit awkward in the beginning. Great educational pose. I'm placing the block more forward than back, feet parallel. So recall how we take our shins forward. I'm going to lift the calf muscle up as if I'm lifting my heels up to make the calves strong. Then Pez dispenser pose, you'll squeeze the block. Even though there's pressure on the block, I want you to squeeze your legs to the midline. And then start to roll the thighs towards the middle and shoot the block back like you're delivering a Pez. This lines your legs up, the greater trochanter with the ankle bone. And it'll create some lumbar curve here to balance that out. This is stage one. You've got to get the thighs back. Then it's tailbone down, lift the belly. You'll feel great length in the low back, length down through the legs, and lift up in your heart. This pose is great for aligning the thighs with the pelvis and supporting the low back. Pez dispenser. This is eye of the needle pose. It's great for stretching the hips and both strengthening and lengthening the low back. You'll cross ankle over at the knee and hold on to the back of your thigh. You see you thread one arm through the legs. This is where the pose gets its name, eye of the needle. Notice I'm holding in the middle of my hamstring and not up in the knee joint. So this is no, and this is the yes. The tendency is going to be to draw your legs as close to you as you can, and this is no. I'm going to have you move your legs as far away as you can till your arms are straight, and literally press your thigh into your hands until you feel your low back arch away from the floor. So in this pose, we're not going flat back. We do that in some other poses, but not in this one. So this is no. This is yes. You'll feel the low back lift away from the floor, and I'm physically pressing my thigh into my hands. Now I'm keeping action of thigh into the hands, and then I'm bringing my legs toward me, but I'm not allowing my low back to go flat. So instead of this, I'm keeping the sitting bones towards the floor and drawing the legs toward me. You'll get a hip stretch. And not only are you stretching and lengthening the low back, you're toning it. So more powerful. This is eye of the needle pose. Hold 3 to 5 to 7 breaths and repeat on the second side. This is baby cradle pose. But before we go into the pose, I want to show you some alignment for sitting on the floor. Here I'm able to sit with legs crossed, and I have a natural curve in my back, meaning my low back is not rounded back and poking out. So if when you sit, your knees are very high and the back is rounded, it's a time to take a blanket, to sit up on the blanket. And this will be important for some of these seated postures. So I've taken my yoga blanket, and I'm sitting more forward on it, so my sitting bones are more towards the front of the blanket, meaning I'm not sitting way back like you might sit on a chair. So this is no. I'm going to have you come more forward, sitting bones, so you have this curve in your low back. And we'll support it by taking the belly back towards the spine without collapsing. So here it is again. Sitting bones tilts the pelvis, lift your belly and take the belly button towards the spine. So the spine is supported from the front, but you have a natural curve. Let's take this into baby cradle pose. In baby cradle, lift one leg up. The arm comes to the inside of the leg and hand to the outside of the foot. I'm drawing my leg back and lifting my low belly and keeping the arch in my low back here. So I'm not collapsing back. This is no. This is rolling the thighs in, lifting the belly. Sweep your shin across your chest. Support your ankle and your knee. And this is the pose, baby cradle. You'll feel a stretch in your hip. If you find this to be easy or not much of a stretch, a second stage is to take the foot to the elbow joint and the arm around the leg. And this is deep baby cradle. Hold the pose for 3 to 5 to 7 breaths. This is great for the hips and low back. And you'll repeat on the second side. This is fire log pose. It's a hip opener. And I'll show 3 stages. Start first with your legs out straight and hands behind you. I'd like you to roll your thighs into the floor and lengthen in your torso, the side body, and lift in the heart. Just a basic ready position. For fire log, bend both knees. Use your hand and bring the foot and ankle up on top of the knee. Flex this foot, hands behind you. And this is the stretch. This can be a really great stretch, especially if you're tight in your hips. A second stage to go a little bit more deeply into the pose is to take the bottom leg and cross it underneath you, and you come more to a seated posture. Hands behind you, and you'll create a natural curve in your low back. To fold forward and get the stretch in the hip, it's lift the low belly, take your rib cage back so you're grounded in your sitting bones, and come forward. You start to feel the fire of the pose, the stretch in the hip. Stage 3, a more deeper expression of the same pose, is to stack the shins. And this is where the pose gets its name, fire log. Your shins are logs which are stacked, and the pose creates a lot of intensity when you fold forward. An important detail, the tendency is to have the foot more towards the inside of your body, and you can see this is not a great position for your ankle. I call this sprained ankle pose, and you don't want to practice sprained ankle pose, weakening the outer ankle. So slide it off, flex both feet, start with a natural curve in your back. Second is to lift the low belly, rib cage goes back, and fold forward. To go deeper, it's lift the low belly, rib cage back, and take the torso down. Breathe into the intensity of this pose. And inhaling, bring your torso up. This is a squat, really great for knees, hips, back. In this squat, I'm going to use a block to help. I find it to be really helpful. I'm not so particularly open in my hips myself. Here's a great way to go into it. In this one, you work with feet wide. I'm about hip width apart, a little bit wider. And I'm using my block, just palming it between my hands. In this pose, I'll bend the knees, and I'm taking the inner groins back and literally sticking my butt out. And I find I have to come a little wider. Lift the low belly, lower down. Lift the low belly, lower down again. Lift the low belly. This makes the space in the hips so you can go down and come into a squat. Challenging for some. Inhale, press through the inner points of the feet and come on up. This is a second squat. It's a variation on the first one we just did. In this squat, the feet are closer together and the knees will come wide apart. In this one, I'd like you to lift your heels up, come down, sort of legs lined up in one line, and then open your knees apart. Lift the belly up and get your pelvis inside your thighs. Here, place your feet on the floor. And if you can't place your feet on the floor, bring a blanket and place it right underneath your ankles, your heels, so you can literally press down into the blanket and come deeper into the squat. Next, lift your heels up if they're on the floor or on a blanket and place your hands underneath them. Resist hands into heels, tailbone down, ground, and then head to floor. To come out, hands to the floor, knees together. Inhale, come on up. This is a stretch for the hip flexor muscles, some of those muscles that connect the leg up into the pelvis, and particularly the psoas muscle, a big hip flexor. Basically start with knees bent, feet on the floor, just how I am, and you'll need a yoga block for this pose. In this pose, lift the hips up and place the block underneath the pelvis. I'm using the middle height of the block. You can also work lower. And on the highest level, I'm going to show the middle level in this video. Once you feel stable on the block, and this is a great position just to be in as well, but to take it deeper, to stretch this deep hip flexor muscle, extend the leg to the wall. Now you can see in my first try here, my foot has not touched the wall, so I have to adjust. It takes a little bit of finding the right length, and the only way to do it is to come up and check it out. So I'm moving closer to the wall. And once again, hips on the block, make sure you feel stable. Extend one of your legs to the wall. You want to be the distance such that your foot can press firmly into the wall. And this is an important detail. The inner edges of the foot press into the wall. So here's what you do not want to have happen. Do you see how my inner edge of the foot lifts up? This will not be supportive for the pose. The ball mount of the big toe, inner heel presses firmly. And it's important to sustain that through this pose. Next, you'll want to hold your ankle, and you can see I can't reach my ankle. Instead of bringing the foot to the ankle, this is no. You keep the foot where it is, and I'd like you to crescent your torso over. Do you see how I sort of inch over until I can hold my ankle? And you'll start to feel there's a stretch from the inner thigh all the ways up, attaching to the spine. And this is your stretch. I'm exhaling rib cage back and pressing through the leg into the inner points of the foot. And you'll hold 3 to 5 to 7 breaths. To come out of the pose, you'll align yourself square again and change sides. Here's how to get into Savasana so you have a really restful pose for the end of your practice. Lie back, legs together, feet flexed, robot arms. So we start out a bit active. Then pressing your elbows down into the floor, you'll activate the upper back muscles. Use them to lift your torso up and get your shoulder blades underneath you. And then lower your torso back down. Arms come to A shape. Allow your legs to relax, your upper back to relax. And open your legs almost as wide as the mat. Use your first few exhalations to suggest for the body to become really heavy into the floor, a letting go for deeper relaxation.